It was a humid summer evening when everything changed. I remember the stillness of the air, the way the ceiling fan buzzed above me as I laid back on the linen-covered couch in the living room. I hadn't seen him in years, not since that 4th of July cookout when we were all younger and a little more careless. But when my cousin Daniel called and said his old friend Thomas was in town and needed a place to stay for a couple of nights, I said yes without thinking. Thomas had always been the quiet one. A man of few words, but his eyes said more than he ever needed to. Back then, I used to catch him watching me when he thought no one would notice. I never asked him about it. I never even admitted to myself how it made me feel. It was one of those silent things you tuck away in the corner of your heart and never really expect to revisit. But as fate would have it, the guest room at my house became the backdrop for something that would haunt me forever, in a way I could never truly explain. When Thomas arrived, I barely recognized him. He was broader, older, and his voice had taken on a deeper, more gravelly tone. His smile, though still crooked and kind, felt like a time machine. I found myself standing at the door, heart beating faster than it should have, pretending to brush hair out of my face when really, I just needed a second to breathe. He stepped inside with a single duffel bag and a tired laugh. "You still drink that peppermint tea?" he asked as if no time had passed. I nodded, motioning for him to come in. I wasn't sure if I was more surprised that he remembered, or that I still did. We sat in the kitchen that evening, the lights low, sipping from mismatched mugs while the cicadas sang outside. He told me about his job out west, the long drives, and the silence of the road. I told him about my work-from-home writing gig and how I'd gotten used to the quiet. We talked like old friends, comfortable, honest, but there was a current under it all. A kind of slow burn that neither of us acknowledged, yet neither of us could ignore. It was almost midnight when I offered to show him the guest room. The house was still, except for the occasional creak of wood expanding in the heat. I walked ahead of him, nervous, trying not to overthink the way my bare feet sounded against the hardwood floor. The guest room was simple: white sheets, a brass reading lamp, and an old rocking chair by the window. I pointed out the extra towels and left a bottle of water on the nightstand. "Thanks, Evelyn," he said, standing in the doorway. "It's more than enough." I hesitated. "If you need anything." "I know where to find you," he said, and smiled. There was something behind that smile, something unreadable. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sheets felt too heavy, the air too thick. I got up, padded into the kitchen for another cup of tea, but I never made it that far. As I passed the hallway, I saw the soft glow of the guest room light under the door. And then I heard it. My name. Not loud. Not urgent. Just soft. Like a question. I froze. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds. Minutes. My fingers brushed the frame of the doorway as I knocked gently. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, the blanket wrinkled behind him. He looked up at me like he'd been waiting. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, his voice lower than I remembered, like it had been dipped in something slow and smoky. I shook my head. "I guess not." He stood, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The room felt smaller. The fan spun above us slowly, casting shadows on the wall. I tried to say something, anything, but the words stuck to my tongue. Instead, I took a breath and turned to leave. But then he reached for my hand. Just the lightest touch. But enough to make me pause. Enough to melt whatever defenses I had spent years building. I turned back to him. His eyes met mine. There was no need for words. No conversation that could have matched the tension buzzing in the air. I stepped closer, and he didn't move. Not until I was so close I could smell the faint trace of his cologne, something cedar and musk, subtle but impossible to ignore. We stood like that, heartbeats in sync, silence heavy. His hand slid to the small of my back. It was gentle. Intentional. The kind of gesture that holds 1,000 unspoken meanings. My breath hitched. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. But I didn't. I didn't want to. When his lips brushed mine, it wasn't desperate. It wasn't hurried. It was deliberate. Slow. Like he wanted to remember every second of it. And so did I. What followed felt like a dream. One where time bends and the world falls away. The room was dim, but I remember the way the shadows danced on his skin, the way he traced lines down my spine like he was reading a story only he could understand. We said nothing. Not even a whisper. Just the rustle of sheets, the rhythm of breath, and the occasional sound of the wind brushing the curtains. It wasn't about lust or recklessness. It was something deeper. Older. A spark that had lived quietly in the corners of our pasts and had suddenly burst into flame. We moved with a strange sort of knowing, like we'd done this before in another life. Every touch felt like a secret. Every glance, a confession. And then, just like that, it was morning. Sunlight spilled through the blinds in golden streaks. I opened my eyes slowly, disoriented for a moment. The bed beside me was empty. I sat up, brushing hair from my face, heart pounding. The guest room door was slightly ajar. I walked out into the hallway, unsure of what I was even looking for. The kitchen was quiet. Thomas was sitting at the table, coffee mug in hand, staring out the window. He turned when he heard me. Our eyes met. And for a moment, neither of us said a word. "Good morning," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Morning," he replied. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. We didn't talk about the night. Not then. Not ever. He left later that afternoon, after helping me fix a loose drawer in the kitchen. We hugged goodbye like nothing had happened. Like we were just friends catching up. Like the guest room hadn't become the setting for something that neither of us could forget. I stood on the porch as he drove away, his truck kicking up dust on the gravel road. I didn't cry. I didn't call him back. We never texted about it. Never hinted. It simply became a chapter closed before it ever had the chance to be written. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the world is still and the air smells faintly of rain, I think about that moment. About how something so brief can leave such a lasting imprint. How one night can shift the gravity of your soul, even if only for a little while. It happened in the guest room. And we never spoke of it again. But I'll remember it always.